Our project for this month is Burano, and it's going to be a fantastic exercise in colour, as you can see, and perspective as well. So Burano is, for those of you that aren't too familiar, it's a fairly small island near Venice in the sort of, I suppose you call it a lagoon or the internal water area of Venice, and a popular day trip location for tourists to wander around these colourful cottages, houses here, and buy souvenirs. And I think it's fairly well known for lace making as well. When I visited about 6 or 7 years ago. Right, so yeah, it's going to be an exercise in painting colourful buildings. There's quite a lot of middle values here. The sun is behind us, and as you know, I always try to emphasize the darks, emphasize the light. So we have got a little bit of darkness here on the left hand side, some darks going across the canal, and some darker boats there. The light being behind us is catching those buildings there, so they're quite brightly lit. On the Pat Chat, as you may know, we do regular Pat Chats, get-togethers via Zoom, and we discuss the up-and-coming painting project. And on the last Pat Chat, I discussed my initial thoughts on composition, and I was counting the number of houses we got here. So there's one sneaking just behind this building here. So one could be 13. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 houses. Look, don't get hung up by the number of houses. We're creating a piece of art here. We just want to create the impression of the colours, the feeling of the place, the colourful buildings, the reflections. That's going to be another challenge. Those reflections, quite still water, and beautiful reflections in there. These buildings being quite brightly lit, the value of the reflections are not too far away. They're a little bit darker, tiny bit darker, maybe 1 or 2% darker than the buildings above. So we're going to have a challenge with those reflections. Perspective as well. I think, imagine this like a road coming towards us, and there's pavements either side. And just think about that angle there. And it's a bit of a curve, isn't it? So it goes around like that, and try and get these angles right. So that's about 45 degrees. So it's not quite 45 degrees. The horizon line is around about there. Yes, just about. I guess when John took this photo, he might have been on top of a bridge. Maybe there's a bridge here. You know, those lovely arched, very iconic shape of the Venice bridges. I reckon there's one here, and we're slightly above the scene, looking down on it. So that could be the horizon. And then we've got to think about the angle of the bottom of the houses, the angle of the side of the quay over there. Don't need to worry too much on the left-hand side. This is all going to be dark. We'll try and keep this fairly loose. Talking of loose, I was toying in my own mind. Do I go loose on this one, or ultra tight, in that all of these, the 13 houses, all of these windows, the architectural details, like this area here where, well, we've got 3 levels here, ground, first, second, and then all of a sudden we go to 2, and then these dormer windows, a little bit tricky there, and then we get back to the 3 and then back to the 2. Yeah, so tight versus, I reckon I'm going to go fairly loose on this one. That's my plan anyway. If I went tight, I'd be here for about 4 or 5 hours, meticulously doing all these shutters and windows and trying to get the distance right between them. That would be, for me, a nightmare. I don't have the patience to do that. So I will use a little bit of artistic license on the number of buildings there. I rather like the shot blind here, creating that shadow. There is this figure here with the light top, catching a little bit of contrast, the light against the dark background. I like the washing as well, so I might shove the blind further down the left, and the washing, I'll have to draw the windows first before the washing. Sometimes I've drawn the washing line on the side of a building, and then I put the windows in later, and I think that line does not connect to those windows. So do the windows first, then the washing. Quite like that light silhouetted against the sky. That sky is quite dark. The reflection of the sky, quite dark. A few little posts here. That's the other iconic thing about the air in Venice as well. Are these posts going down these angular, I think they're pine or something like that. These posts that are shoved into the silty bottom of the canals. And then these little craft, they're all probably around about the same size, these crafts. Some of them got tarpaulin covers, making them a little bit easier to draw and paint. And then, of course, the reflections of those boats as well. So that's the scene. We'll come back to that in a minute on my plans. My materials: Saunders Waterford, cotton, paper, 300 grams. Paints are from Mark Jackman in the UK. Neutral tint, burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, spring green, Viridian green. Probably won't be, oh, there are some greenhouses. Might be using a few of the greens. Cobalt green, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, cadmium red, light red, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow, few gouache, opaque paints, bottom right corner. Brushes wise, I'm going to be using my Tintoretto mop brush, but any good mop brush will do, and then a small synthetic round, and a rigger brush as well. This is the Levinson rigger brush. Right, so initial thoughts. Now, I did do a few little thumbnail sketches, and I reckon the most important point to get right, positioning on your, assuming you're going landscape on this. So again, on Pat Chat, we did discuss going portrait. Maybe you could do that. You could make a composition out of that. I know also some of you were thinking about not bothering with the left-hand buildings and just doing the right. Whatever takes your fancy on this. But I did a few thumbnail sketches where I was waiting, and that's the important point there. That point there, for me, that is the most important point to get right. It's just above that center line, and yeah, that's quite an important point. And also it's close to an area of maximum contrast, dark and then the light. I may not, with these houses, I may not go as dark as it is in the photo. I might just lighten that up just a tiny bit, and as I say, go loose, not really put in all the windows and necessarily all the houses. Right, let me just check for any question. Don't think there is. Okay. Hopefully a few of you are painting along with me, and I'll give instructions later on about move that microphone away. Later on I'll give instructions on those of you on the relevant Patreon tier, the process for submitting your painting to me, a photo of your painting to me for your individual critique. All right, so first of all, an outline drawing. And I will start with the left-hand building. The left-hand building here, getting in that point, getting in the roof line correct, these angles here, there, and then just fill in the detail from there. So a fairly vertical side to the left-hand building. And then that point I was referring to at the end, just where the canal tucks around the corner. Let's imagine that's sort of a roundabout there. Okay. And the rooftops just loosely indicate those. Add a bit more detail in a minute. So that curvature up, and then the bottom of the buildings, well, in the distance the pathway is almost horizontal, and then as it comes around we're getting a steeper angle. So that's the bottom of the buildings, and then the very edge of the quayside, like that. Back to the left-hand side, and the edge of the quay, which is quite lightly coloured. Quite lightly coloured compared to the sort of crazy paving of the pavement. And the building on the left has a sort of salmon pinkish bottom and then a bluish top, but to be honest with you, this is all going to be quite dark, so I don't want to be too hung up with the colours there. We've got that lamp silhouetted against the sky there. Now for some boats. One of the other things we discussed on Pat Chat was these boats here. Maybe, and I was reluctant to say yes I would, but maybe move some of these boats a little bit further down so that we've got more of them in over towards the right hand side. They sort of stop almost on that center line. Maybe they might be a little bit more attractive. The composition might have a better balance if we had a boat down there. So let's just see how we get on with that. The top edge of these boats are almost in line, same height as the quay side, which can make them a little bit more tricky. So that's that boat there, manoeuvred more down to the bottom right corner. Right-hand boats. Now the left-hand boats are, a lot of them are going to be in shade. Can keep these simple. These are the boats I need to get right, because a lot of these are going to be in the light, and we're going to see more of their shapes. I need to get those. Right. Back onto the right-hand side, I need to get the the water's edge correct and the edge of the key side. So that's going to be like that, and then the actual water's edge. I suppose the height of that little wall there's about a couple of feet or so. Then the houses. As I say, I'm not going to be fixated by the exact number of them being 12 or 13, but let's try and get a good few in there, and all of these lovely colors as well. And they're also different. I mean, that yellow there is a deeper yellow than that. That's more of a sort of creamy, opaquish yellow. And then that there, that red there is different from that red. That blue is different from that blue. That's almost like an orangey, ochre color. Then we got green. Makes for an interesting group of buildings. Let's start first of all with the bottom of those buildings, and maybe some verticals just to define where these buildings stop and start. Okay, so let's just count how many I've got. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-ish, 7, 8, 9. That'll do. Let's get in a shop blind. I'll move my blind. Now the top of the blind is almost horizontal. Of course, it's just above the first floor, the ground floor, and in there. The shadow from that like that. Let's get the windows in before I do the washing line. Washing line might be somewhere around there. Windows then. Now, just on the bend of the canal, there's just two levels. And then there's maybe 3 here. So these are my 3s. Then we've got 2s here. Also with these windows, not make them equally spaced. When I look at the photo, they're not equally spaced. Some of them are close together, others a little bit more spread out. So try and do that as well. Now, some of these windows will have shutters. My horizon line is right about there. The washing line, so there's a window there, window there, window there. Let's have the washing between these two. An assortment of garments being dried, and their shadows. And then we've got some ground floor windows, doorways as well. Let's get in that figure that I noticed. All right, so lightly clothed against a darker background. I think that might turn out all right. Check these boats. I did them rather quickly and want to make sure they're okay. So if I don't get the drawing of these right, it's a bit more difficult to rectify them later on. I'm not going to put in the posts. I'm just imagining where they're going to be. Down the right hand side there, left hand side, get the angle right as well. A few window openings on the left hand side. And I think that is about it. Deliberately keeping the drawing fairly simple. One thing I've forgotten is trying to put in the edge, the bottom edge of the reflection. So if that, so trying to work out where, depending on the height of these buildings, trying to work out the bottom edge of those reflections. All right, a little bit like that. Quite a few of these boats will be dark as well. I'll indicate that with some cross hatching. The sun coming from behind us, so that this will all be in shade. The left-hand side will be in shade. A lot of these boats will be in shade, just basically silhouetted against the lighter water and the reflections of those buildings. Yeah, I'll just have the one figure. I could put more figures in. As I said earlier, Burano is quite a popular place. When all the boat trips go over from Venice, it's these streets are thronging with loads of day trippers. Anyway, so I guess John took the photo at a quieter time of day. Right, let's make a start on the painting then. Now, my plan for the painting is as follows. Of course, we're going light to dark. And generally for me, top to bottom or left to right. So I'm going to pop in that sky, first of all. Then miss out the rooftops. Come back to those in a minute. Then the buildings. Then the reflections of those buildings, keeping this area quite light, lighter than in the source photo. Then the rooftops. Then the sky, the reflection of the sky. and then that left-hand building and other bits of shadow. That's roughly my plan. Stick to the plan. Right. Brush I'm going to use first of all then for the sky, and I haven't pre-wet the paper, by the way. I'm often asked that. I would pre-wet it if we had a lot of area for the sky and I wanted a very smooth wash. In the photo, that's a very smooth sky. I'm not going to bother with that. Just going to go straight in, fairly big brush, and paint around. Doesn't matter if I go over the buildings on the left-hand side, but certainly these rooftops, try and paint around the edge of those. Color-wise for that sky, I'm going to go with my normal duo of my preferred duo of cerulean blue and cobalt blue. For the water, I'll obviously go a bit more intense. So let's make sure I've mixed up enough for that area there. Almost a 50-50 mix. Cerulean, cobalt. This might granulate a little bit, but it doesn't matter. One of the charms of watercolor. Make sure it's well and truly mixed. I want to go fairly dark with this because that's going to the darker I go with the sky, these buildings will look lighter as well. Now I'm fairly close, I think, to the intensity I want. Not too much paint on the brush. I need to make sure there's a good point and a good edge for painting around these shapes. Yeah, that should be okay. Down to the rooftops, and don't need to be too precise here with the edge of the rooftops. That is it. And once you've done it, resist the temptation to go back into it like I was doing there. Clean my brush, because we're now doing the buildings. I've got a bigger, you might be able to hear it on the microphone, I've got a bigger pot, almost a small bucket of water, just to make sure my brush is well and truly clean. These buildings then, all different colours. Well, let's start off with the very light terracotta. So I'll mix my warms down here and cools here. Warm, cool. Something very weak for the most distant building. Not too much paint on the brush. And these windows, infuriatingly, they've got this light border around them. Now, you can, if you're patient enough, do that, paint around that border. I'm not going to. Going to try, where necessary, I'll use a little bit of white gouache at the end. Right, next house is going to be yellow. And then the bottom of these buildings are a lot, well, quite a few of them are a lot lighter. Right, the next one along is like a sort of salmon-y colour again. A little bit of burnt sienna on this one, quite light. That's that one. Next one to it is, well, let's keep true to this. So we've got blue, then we've got, I might miss out that one. I'll go blue. No, I will have that one. I will have that lighter one in between the blue and the salmon. Right, this blue is very similar to the sky. After using the brown, make sure my brush is clean, otherwise it'll go a little bit grey. And this blue one will go over to here. That's the blue one. Then we've got a light one. Right, this light one, I'm going to use a little bit of dirty white gouache I've got down in the bottom right corner. Then we go to well, it's a sort of salmony pink, I reckon. Bit of that light red, bit of my white gouache, bit of orange, tiny bit of orange, tiny bit of this cat orange, and put that one in. Again, go a little bit lighter towards the ground floor. Paint around the shop blind. We're going so that's red, that's yellow. I'll make that red, make that one green. Next one along, a little bit of the alizarin crimson, cadmium red, light red. And the first floor. Down to the top of the shop blind, and then down below, paint around the blind, paint around the figure. There we go. Back to yellow again, and I've got a bit of, I'll use a bit of yellow and a bit of white gouache, cadmium yellow, and white gouache. Then we're back to the red again. Ooh, that's probably a little bit too dark. Paint around the windows, paint around the clothing as well, the washing line. And then the right-hand one, the right-hand building, do I go green or that ochre color? Let's go green, let's go green. So I've got my Viridian green. Maybe you've added a little bit of yellow to a Viridian green. You'll get that sort of color. Of course, this will dry a little bit lighter. Down to the street level. Again. Little bit of color for the pathway there, and keep it very light, I reckon. A little bit of burnt sienna into this mix here. A little bit of blue. It's too dark. Doesn't matter, I leave some of the paper unpainted. Could be just bits of the stonework catching the light. And I'll do the actual vertical wall as well. Next then, the reflections of those buildings, and I want to still keep that area fairly light. So these the more vivid reflections come here. Start on this section. So let's get in. Right, the reflection of that building. So miss out these because the boats are obscuring those reflections. So this is my first reflection. And with my same brush, just define a few little horizontal reflections. Next building down, a bit more of the intense blue. Not too much darker than what it is, than the actual colour of the building. There we are. Then this off-white building, which is my sort of light brown mix here with a little bit of white gouache, just a tiny, tiny bit darker than the building. Now that salmon one. Then the red. Bit of alizarin crimson, burnt sienna. And the yellow. Could really have done these reflections as I did that yellow there. I could have done the reflection for it, just thinking about it. Be a little bit more efficient. Then the darker red building. So alizarin crimson, bit of burnt sienna. It actually is a little bit darker than that. You see the compare that to that. It is a bit darker, isn't it? So the edge of the reflection is going to be around about there. Get a little bit of movement in the water. And then finally, the green. Bit more intense. Colour. Down to that bottom right corner. Okay, so far so good. Let's do the rooftops now. Let me just check if there's any questions. Hopefully, if those of you that are painting along with me, hopefully you're doing all right, or you might like to, I know some of you like to do a little sketch as you're following me and then do a larger study for your submission painting. Right, rooftops, try and keep them fairly light, not too dark. Just consult the source photo. So because the sun is coming down at that sort of angle, they are, yeah, they're similar value to the sky. If this was a black and white photo, that the values would be very similar. All right, let's use a little bit of light red for this. A little bit of yellow ochre. That's too much. And the rooftops are going to look a little bit more convincing, I think, when we get the shadow in, the shadow on the edge of the rooftops and little chimney tops and so on. So just loosely defining these rooftops here. And then that one there. Now for the sky reflection. Darker than that blue. I might actually add a little bit of ultramarine blue to this. So mainly cobalt blue and a little bit of ultramarine blue to get that warmer blue and a more intense blue as well. Don't want to go too dark. Again, I need to mix up enough. That should be about it. Enough paint here to cover that whole area. And a test, first of all. Not too much paint on the brush. Check my edge again. Excuse me. Over to the edge of the east side now. This is where I need to get in this sort of jagged edge on the roof, the edge of the roof reflections. Cover the rest of the area and a bit like the sky. Once you've done it, just leave it. Perhaps put in a few little reflections, little waves, little gentle waves there. There we go. That will dry a little bit lighter. Next will be, well, while that's drying, let's get in some of these boats on the far side. Now, I need to be careful here with these boats because some of them are quite dark, whereas the ones down here, the one I've made up, I need to be careful now, that one there, I need to be careful now with its colour and the reflection. So a little bit of thought is required here to think what the colour might be. A lot of these will be fairly dark up there. I'll get in, actually there's a little bit of, beyond these darker boats, there's a bit of shadow being created by these buildings on the left hand side. Let's get that in. Let's get that in first. So that blue there, add a bit of burnt sienna to it, and just go for it. Just look at the photo. And some of these shadows are going up the wall on that right hand side. There we go. And then the boats. Now, the boats will be quite dark here. Dark, dark, dark. But this one will be light. Then I've got the dark bit of the harbour wall to do as well. Something dark. Well, a little bit of alizarin crimson, a brown, a little bit of neutral tint, ultramarine blue. So not black as such. Few little reflections. Down to this boat here. Then the reflections from that boat. This boat here, let's make this a little bit lighter with this brown. Keep the top light for a moment. And then the reflections. So I'm using the edge of my brush horizontal, just gentle horizontal movements, and the more I come away from the boat, then the more erratic those reflections will be. There we go. This one, right, that's going to be this bow here, and it's got a sort of golden varnish exterior, the wood. I've got some quinacridone gold. If you haven't got quinacridone gold, maybe a burnt sienna with a cadmium orange would give you something similar. So yeah, that cadmium orange with that burnt sienna. That would give you something similar. Let me just try some of this quinacridone gold here. Quinacridone gold with a little bit of cadmium orange. Yeah, let's see how we get on with that. So left-hand side. There's a motor on the back. All right, the reflection, a little bit darker. There we go. Now I need to connect these boats with the vertical wall of that far quay side, and fairly light above the waterline, then a little bit darker below. Let's keep with this. Let's keep with this brown here, just mixed in with the blue, just to grey it down a bit. And go in just between those two boats, and then I should just add a touch of green in with this one. Over to the right hand side, and then the reflection for that will be a little bit darker neutral tint, burnt umber, a little bit of ultramarine blue. That reflection of the wall in there. And then this dark bit down here. There's actually a bit of an angular shadow that comes across the, there must be a building here that's creating a bit of a shadow. You'll see it on the source photo. There we go. All right, so I've obviously got the windows and the shadows underneath the rooftops and the blind there, the washing to do on that right-hand side. Let's now go over to the left. Right, let me just see if there's any questions. Oh, Naomi is asking, what's the size of the Tintoretto? This is a size 6. And it's a series 1407. It's a synthetic mop brush, all right? But there are lots of other makes, similar brushes like well, you could use the, there's a Cassani there, size 4. Da Vinci Cassani, that's a similar, do you see that, the similarity there? And there's a Raphael brush. Some of the Raphaels, there's a smaller Raphael, but they do a soft aqua brush used those before, they're quite good. Or you can go for the squirrel, Pure Mop squirrel, similar size. Okay. I think with size, it's down to as large a brush as you can get away with, really, in relation to the size of the paper. Right, let's go dark on this left-hand side. Get that contrast in on that left. So I'm mixing up my quite dark, intense colour. The top bit blue, cool. Cobalt blue. And then just define that edge, making sure we're fairly parallel with my left-hand edge as well. Doesn't matter if we come out a little bit. There's little balconies just protruding out that are being silhouetted right down to more of a salmony colour now. So I'm using a bit of the cadmium orange here to create that warmer colour. Bit of yellow ochre as well. And then continue on with the walkway here. Right, that's going to be, we'll go a little bit lighter here and a little bit grayer. Add a bit of cerulean blue to this mix. A greyish colour, I reckon. Up to the edge, the light border edge of the key side. So my grey is like a cerulean blue, and burnt sienna. That's quite nice. I always think it's quite a nice grey. A bit more cerulean blue in that. There we go. And then these darker boats on the left. This all-important area I was referring to earlier. Get the silhouette of the boats. And then this one here on the corner. And so that's the tarpaulin cover. What I'm doing now is this little boat here. Right, tarpaulin cover, and then the hull go fairly dark, darker than that. And then the reflections. And the dark reflection, sorry, the dark wall of the quayside on the left. And a little bit of reflections of that as well. The reflections of the rooftop there we go. And next, well, time for the windows, I think. Time for the windows and shadows on the right hand side. Let me just see if there's any questions. Nope, don't think there is. Okay, right. Reflection, sorry, shadows on the right hand side. Now, not too dark in the distance, but maybe go a little bit more intense as we come closer to us. This is where we're going to define the shop blind shadow and the shadow of the washing as well. Mix my shadow here. So it's a bit of a sort of dark violet that I've got going. So the main shadow is just underneath the rooftop, the edge of the roof. And then we've got this sort of bit of a curve going up. And then a few windows, again, not too dark in the distance. And hopefully you can still see your pencil lines. Right, let's do these two here. In fact, that pencil line is almost as dark as it needs to be. Yellow building. Then the sort of light brown building. Then we're down to the blue. So I can start getting a bit darker with my windows and shadows now. Then this off-white building in the middle. In fact, some of these shutters are a little bit green. They've got a dark green to them. So just pick up a bit of viridian green. as I'm going over. And this brush now, rather than using the point, I've got a tiny, tiny edge, rather like a little sort of flat brush, really. All right, a little bit of an edge to it. There's the shop blind. Need to do the shadow for that. Sorry, there's not much commentary from me at the moment. I'm just concentrating. It's a bit tedious doing all these. That's the thing about Venice, all these windows and intricate patterns around the edges. Right, shadow of the shop blind. And we can then hopefully define that figure as well. Around the figure. And the shadow of the clothing. Taking my reference from the washing line, it's over to the right. So the shadow is below the clothing and to the left. And just obviously replicating the shape of the garments that we've got there. All right, so there we go. Hopefully it looks a little bit like a washing line. All right, going to continue with more windows and doorways. And then green building. You can see I painted around those windows, and then there's a stripy sort of blind on that doorway. And then another doorway to the right. I'll tidy up some of these windows and doors in a minute. Need to go over to just check this is right. Need to go over the left-hand side now, and windows, lamp, make this a little bit darker here. I've got to get in those posts that really sort of says Venice, Burano, that sort of area with those mooring. I think they're mooring posts. Those angular mooring posts. Maybe add a bit more detail to the boats, figure, reflections of some of the windows as well. Better do some of those reflections now while I've got this. Well, I've got this darker. Right, more windows. Yellow. Oh, this red building here. Let's get some windows in there. Yellow building. Red building. That's the actual water's edge. Then the windows of the greenhouse. There we go. Right. Back to the left. To the left. Stick with my mop brush and can be a little bit more loose with these windows on the left. Gutters, drain pipe, the bracket for the lamp, and then the sort of wires and cables and utility stuff going across the top of the ground floor. Top of the ground floor windows. Bits and pieces. There's a bicycle wheel there, just jutting out, and just glaze over a little bit this. It's too dark. Glaze over a little bit this border. I think I might just swap now to a smaller brush for more of the detail work. Right, a small synthetic round brush. Let me just check for any questions. Okay, right. Small synthetic brush. Not too much paint on the brush. Let me just dry it off a little bit. Now, with this brush, I can do those posts figure. Let me just rub out some of these pencil lines first of all. See what we're doing. It's better. Not too much, as I say, not too much paint on the brush, and try and get a good point to it. I'm not too worried about the colour on the brush, and just put in a few verticals, drain pipes, that sort of thing. There's some more lines defining the levels of the buildings. And just behind the shop blind, we can just make out some windows. This figure. Put some flesh colour on the figure. Bit of a shadow. Right, the shadow figure's always difficult when the light's behind you and you've got these figures in front of you doing the shadow. It's sort of a bit like that. Yeah, I'll do. Perhaps there's a little bit in the shade. There we go. Right, these boats. Outboard motor. Bit more definition to the side of the key. Outboard motor. And let's imagine this boat here doesn't have a tarpaulin cover. So we've got these thwarts. How to get this right now? These thwarts across these little chairs and bits and pieces. There we go. the pavement, the quayside on this other side. Let's get a few little lines there to define that material on the quayside. And let's just strengthen up some of these windows. We'll keep the clothing white. The shop sign here. So I'm just picking on little shapes I can see on the far side now. The posts, let's do these posts on the far side first of all, and maybe a little bit closer together. Well, they'll stop here. The last one will be sort of there, and these posts, they are at an angle and parallel. Last one about here then. There we are. And then a little bit of detail on the far side here. Posts. I think time-wise will be about another 10 minutes or so, all right? So hopefully this is all right for you. Right, post here. A few more there. And what else can I do? Oh, bit of some of these aerials catching the light, and maybe, if I can, just a little bit of white for the frames, just to strengthen up some of the borders around the windows. And then I reckon I'm about done. So I've got some white gouache here, bottom right corner, I need to make sure this is not too thick, not too thin for this. And with as thin a brush as you've got, I've got a rigger brush here. That might be a bit too much paint on that brush. Need to get a flat edge. Now, can I, with this brush, can I just strengthen up some of these? Not too much. As I said, first of all, I don't want to go too tight with this. And the danger is what I'm doing now, I'm going against what I wanted to do, but I just want to strengthen some of these white frames a little bit. And also some of the white lines. In the reflections as well. Maybe now you've got to be careful using white in the shade because it would just look a little bit too odd. If I went into white, these windows here do have a light frame, but they're almost grey. My white paint's too intense, it's too bright at the moment. Let's just see if I can strengthen up any more of these windows. And then we'll draw things to a close. That boat there. Yeah, I think it looks all right. All right, I think I'm nearly done. Let me just spot another pencil line there. Need some of these posts to be reflected as well, don't I? There we go. Well, there's a few little extra bits and pieces I could do to it, but essentially I think I'm finished. So I hope you enjoy that, and I'll be posting on Patreon more instructions on how you can send in your photos. And while the web app is there, the web browser access to member posts, you can probably still pop them in there, but use the Patreon app to post your effort. We'd love to see, even if you're not on the critique level, still love to see them via the Patreon app, and click on the gallery chat area. And I'll catch up with you on the next one. Thanks for watching.